Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. And I got to tell you something about my latest sponsor. They're great. It's called Blowfish for Hangovers, and this stuff is a lifesaver. Because as I say, it's football season now, so people are out drinking. Because football's on Monday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. So people are out drinking, and it's the stuff will hook you up. Because after a big night, just wake up, drop 2 Blowfish tablets in water, and drink it down. Super easy. It tastes great. It has this lemon flavor. It tastes great. And it's recognized by the FDA, so you know it works. So here's what you do. You go to 4hangovers.com. That's F-O-R hangovers.com. 4hangovers, F-O-R hangovers.com. And use the promo code Cooper to get 20% off your order. Or you can just look for Blowfish in the pain reliever aisle of the CVS. And so if you hate being hungover, you got to get some Blowfish. Anyway, we have a great show today. A returning guest. He's been on a few times, and he always has good stories. He's always got a lot going on. He's got his opinions. He's a Philadelphia fan, and that's what counts. My guest is Rich Scheidner. How you doing, Rich?
Hey, Coop. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. So I'm going to start off. I saw you posted on Facebook last night, and we were all tweeting and posting. What did you think about the debates?
Wow, it was truly. The most amazing part to me was him squawking about stamina, and he flailed about so badly. When you talk about stamina, Hillary's like Springsteen. She was just getting warmed up at 90 minutes. He looked like Fat Elvis forgetting the lyrics to Are You Lonesome Tonight? It was bad. It was bad. He looked like bad. He went off the rails. He was incoherent at the end. He flailed about. Yeah, that was my main thing. There were a lot of other things, but that was my main one.
Now, where'd you watch it? Did you watch it with some friends? Did you go out and watch it?
Look, I was home here, hopping up and down off the couch, jumping around. I nearly was as animated as watching the Eagles game. I got to be honest with you.
Well, you know what amazes me about it, and this always cracks me up, and this is the thing about Facebook and Twitter and just society now is that, like, nobody, I don't like either of them, but it was obvious Hillary won. But people sit there, and it's amazing that people that sit there and say, "Oh yeah, Trump destroyed her," and it's like when I sit there and I watch, a football game, and you got that fan who's like, "Oh, well, it's pass interference." It's like, what game are you watching? That's the thing that surprised me, and people are blowing up on social media about it, and I'm like, guys, you couldn't have been watching the same show. It's like you were watching, I was watching All in the Family, and you were watching Charles in Charge. I mean, 2 completely different things.
Yeah, I don't get into political arguments on my page. I post something funny. You can either like it, or you can ignore it, or you can post something funny. But I don't waste my time on political arguments on Facebook. I think your time is better spent trying to create mud out with jumper cables, trying to create life out of a jar of mud with jumper cables and a car battery. It's just a waste of time. I don't argue political.
I'm the same way. I'll post my jokes, and then I always see people start arguing on my thread, and I'm like,
I remind them of the rules. I just remind them, and then you have the trolls, and you usually go to a trolls page, and they come out of nowhere, and there's nobody there. It's got 1 like. It's his liking his own post and commenting on his own post, and there's nothing else there.
Well, that's on Twitter, man. You get some of these trolls, and it's like some guy was trolling me about some guy trolled me about the guests I get, and he had 35 followers, and I'm like, you know what? Go down, go in the basement. Why don't you make some shoes? Okay? I was like, do you even wear shoes? And he was like, I don't get it. I'm like, exactly.
It's a typical troll, man. Nobody's at their page, so they're coming out looking. If you want to go, didn't your mommy tell you not to do this? It's not the way to make friends.
Right. So now you were just. How was Vegas? I know you were just in Vegas, and you're playing. Is it after all this time? Is it grueling? Because it's what you did 14 shows, 2 shows a night.
14 shows in 7 days. So it is something that'll get you in shape. It is sort of a stand-up boot camp. And I like that because it's a great way to add some new material. So I like that part of it. But the Laugh Factory, it's good. It's a good club. The room is great. But it is a grind. It is a grind, Absolutely. Yeah, by that 14th, you're like, I'm done talking. I am done talking.
Now, what kind of crowds are you getting? I mean, is it all different because it's Vegas? I mean, you have
they they were doing very well. Every audience was nearly sold out the first show. Second shows were about half or whatever, but the first shows were packed, and there were a lot of people local as well as out of town. So it's a big mix, age-wise and demographic. It's just a good mix. I like it. It's Vegas. It's like very across the country kind of place.
Now, before that though, I know weren't you in Norway or something? I mean,
I do a lot of cruise ships, so I've been all over. I've done cruise ships this year in Vietnam, Norway, Europe, South America. It's all over. Alaska. I like Alaska. I did a bunch of Alaskas this summer. Alaskan cruises.
Now, I'm sure you've been on the show before and you've told your story about your first horrendous time on a cruise ship.
Oh, jeez, man! It was one of the first. I was just coming back into stand-up, so it was the first cruise ship I did. This guy said, you might want to try cruise ships. You might like them. So it was actually a one day out from New York Harbor. They just kind of went out and came back, and it was January 1st. So it was people who weren't ready to quit partying for New Year's Eve, and. So you're up in the lounge. I'm up in the lounge. So I get up there. The place is packed, and they're doing a karaoke contest. And they're about 10 deep at the DJ booth with people, New Yorkers all screaming, "I gotta sing! I promised my parents I'd sing for their anniversary." And they all had my kid. I'm trying to save my kid. I gotta sing. My kid needs me to sing. They're all pleading with their sob stories, and the DJ's going, "We only can do 2 more, and then we're going to do the stand-up comedy show," and they're all screaming, "F the comedy show, F the comic." That's before I even walk into the place. That's the first thing I come to. So the little guy who's running it, the little cruise director, assistant cruise director, I can't even find him. Finally, I'm just standing by the DJ booth. He comes up and says, "I'm very busy right now, but you're going to go on right now. We're going to stop the karaoke, and you're going on." So they're only 15 minutes behind. So they stop the karaoke, and then they start playing disco music from the 70s. So now the dance floor is filled with people doing the bump. Old people doing the bump, younger people doing the bump, everybody's doing the bump. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, the bump. Yeah. I mean, yeah,
Yeah. They're all there dancing, and I'm watching this for a couple songs. Then all of a sudden, the dance music just stops in mid-song. So they're all standing out on the dance floor confused, like there was some sort of technical problem. And this little guy, this little cruise director, gets out there in the middle of it. He goes, all right, everybody, back up, make some space here. He's just making some space. And they're literally, that's all they're doing is just backing up. So they're just standing around the brink of the dance floor, and he's kind of pushing them back. And he says, all right, we'll do a comedy show. Here we go, comedy show. Here you go. Here comes the comedian. All right, Rich Scheidner. No intro in terms of like, you've done anything or whatever. He mangles my name typically, and I got to go out and try to turn this into a comedy show. And thank God, being typical New Yorkers, they started heckling me, and that's blood in the water. I went after them, and of course, New Yorkers love you putting somebody else up on a cross. And so I dealt with the hecklers, but it was horrendous. It was hard, man. Dance floors eat jokes. They eat them. And it was very tough. So as soon as I finished time. I say, thank you, good night. He runs out there. Now he's dressed like the Indian from the Village People. He's got his Indian costume on. And him and the other one's dressed like the Village People. Come right out. No, like, hey, thank you. How about a hand for a comedian? I mean, as soon as I said thank you, they started playing YMCA over the system. And he comes out, does a little dance. They just do a little fantasy lip-syncing YMCA. And that was it.
Now, how have cruise lines changed? Because now, I heard some have clubs.
I found that was an aberration. That was just badly managed, badly handled. And I didn't want to do cruise ships. And then our buddy Bruce Smirnoff said, look, that's not the way they run. That's not the way they work. It's not like that. And he convinced me to start doing them. And I go through his agency, and they're great. I mean, it's like, the theaters, they have beautiful theaters on the ship, and I do these shows, and 700 people or whatever. It's great. I like it. I don't have any illusion like I'm drawing anything. It's not like I draw them. They have a choice to come see me or stare at open water. I mean, that's their choice.
Now, how do you even keep from not eating everything? I was on a cruise once, man, and you're walking around. There's always food. How do you sit there and self-contain that you don't eat? Because it's, I mean, you grew up near Philadelphia. You're a South Jersey guy. You know, you go through Philadelphia, you see a guy selling pretzels on the corner. You're pulling out your buck, even though the guy's the scummiest looking, dirtiest looking guy ever, and he's got those bags of pretzels. You're buying them because they're so good. How do you contain how do you stop from eating?
Well, I actually don't do that. I think that's just you, Steve. That's all. That's it's just you doing that. But I just, you know, I stay busy. I'm on a cruise ship. I spend my time writing. I wrote the book on the cruise ship, basically. So I spend my time writing, and I you know, just discipline. I go eat 3 times a day like a normal person. I stay away from the buffet. I exercise. You know, I don't. If you're not doing anything, yeah, I guess you could just spend all your time up in the buffet. But you know, I got stuff to do. I try to keep myself occupied.
Now you wrote the book, Kicking Through the Ashes. My life as a stand-up in the 1980s comedy explosion. What gave you the idea to write that? And because I know, and I've seen you at like Bob's Espresso telling your stories, and you're a master storyteller. And the funny thing is, I told someone, we were talking about comics, and I told someone how we had worked together in Valencia. And what's amazing is you would start doing your act, and you'd have them, and then you'd break into some of your stories, which is very different when you go see comedy, and you still have them eating out of your hands. What made you sit there and decide, I'm going to start, you know, changing my act to tell the stories, and also what made you decide to go, you know what, I'm going to write a book, because it's a big thing, because they're your stories?
Yeah, you know, there were a couple things. One, I became Phyllis Diller's friend a long time ago, and Phyllis and I would talk about the history of stand-up. So this is like, it had to be like 10 years ago after I Killed came out. She said, you should write a book on the history of stand-up comedy. So I started working on that, researching that. And I wrote about 8 chapters of the history of stand-up comedy, and it looked like a textbook. I said, nobody's going to want to, this is like 3 people in the country who want to read this. It was so, even for me, I look back on it, it was boring. It was just textbook, you know. I go, but I thought, well, then if I could write about my era, the 1980s, which was a pretty big era in stand-up comedy. It's the explosion that went from where comedy was just sort of like a side dish in show business to where it became like a main course. It became a whole meal. Stand-up became a big deal. And I can write about that era, and I got a lot of stories where I could, you know, entertain people with funny stories to illustrate what happened then. And so that became my focus, just doing the 80s. And a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, Vic Anderson, kept encouraging me. He said, put them, because I was writing it, I you know, I'm a comic, I need feedback, right? And you just can't go walk around and people, hey, let me read this story to you. And he said, why don't you put them on Facebook? People like to read stuff like on Facebook and see how it goes there. And so I started doing that, and you know, I started getting positive feedback on Facebook to encourage me to write another one.
Now, how do you structure them? I mean, because you don't want them to go too long, and that's the thing. Your stories are very succinct, but then also when you write, I mean, the old thing is we want to fill a book. You know, it's like the old when you're in college or high school and you write that term paper, and you know you don't know shit, but you know you got to make it last at least 3 pages, so you have like 3 paragraphs, and you just butter it up with, you know, and then this happened, and you start spewing shit up. But how do you sit there to make them, when they're shorter and they're very tight? I mean, then you got to sit there as a person writing a book thinking, I'm going to need a lot of content.
You know, I've been posting some of these things on Facebook that didn't make the book. I had about 50 stories I cut out of the book. I couldn't generate more stories if I tried. I mean, it just so many came out. There was no way I could justify putting out a 500-page book from a guy nobody remembers. So I had to make cuts, and I wanted to make it so that it, you know, I put a story in about heckling or joke thievery. So I just stuck to the stories. I don't get try to flower it up. I know I don't like writing. I'm sort of like, I like stripped down writing, more Hemingway than Faulkner. I like just get to the point. I'm not big on people who use 15 adjectives to describe something. And I just want to get to the point of the story, like stand-up. I think I used my style in stand-up in my writing. It's the same thing, you know, in stand-up. You can't be up there just putting in a bunch of excess baggage in the plane. It'll crash. So you sort of got to be stripped down and stand-up, and I think that style carried over to my writing. It's just kind of stripped down.
Now, how did you go through that selection process and pick the stories? Because you said you left about 50 out. I mean, how many are in the book, would you say?
they're 82 chapters. I don't think any more one chapter is more than 4 pages or something. I don't know how many stories there are. There are a lot of stories. You know, a lot of stories.
How do you?
I just got rid of, you know, if I had a, you know, like how many pot stories can you put in? So, or how many stories about being high on drugs or on stage can you put in? So, you know, just pick the best one, or I thought the best one that showed that. I mean, how many stories can you put in about heckling? So I put the best story about heckling. I mean, I can't get a better story than getting in a fist fight with an audience member, right?
Right.
I mean, you're having a fist fight on stage. I think that's the best heckling story I can put in.
Now, when did you get into a fist fight on stage, and where was it at?
It was a club called Wits End in Lansing, Michigan. Joe Dunkel, who saw the story on Facebook, helped me with remembering some of the facts of it. That's another advantage of putting it on Facebook. People who were actually witnesses or participants, you know, would help me out with the facts. So it was 1981. I get to this club, and it was a club that was a former biker club that had been just renovated into a comedy club. They had a great stage, great sound system, but they left the pool tables in the back of the room and the video machines. They had, you know, like Pac-Man and Space Invaders, whatever they were back then. So I walk into the place. I noticed they pulled the plug on the video games, but I also saw guys still shooting pool. So I actually said to the club owner, I said, listen, they're going to close those tables down, right, when I go up there. And he's like, oh, yeah. Well, they didn't. Those guys refused to quit playing. And I get on stage, and they're playing. And you know, I mean, any distraction, like a blender in a room, distracts from the joke, you lose the joke. And these guys were hitting those balls hard, and there's a crack. You know, I'd be in the middle of a punchline, there's a crack from the back of the room, a cue ball in a rack. You know what I mean? And so I turn to them, I say, hey, guys, listen, how about you stop playing while I'm up here? I was really nice to them at first. I said, and afterwards, I'll play you for beer. Well, I'll play you for beer. You know, I'll play you afterwards. And then they're like, F you, man. And I said, so then I went after him. And one of the guys was wearing an REO Speedwagon T-shirt. So I said, you're an REO Speedwagon fan? Oh man, that's a Limp Dick fan. That's a Limp Dick band, man. They're gonna be Limp Dick when they bury you in that ratty T-shirt, right? And I mean, I went after him. And he decides he's going to come, you know, I guess he was the designated guy to go after me. So he heads for the stage, he throws down his cue stick, which was his first mistake right there, right? I mean, if you're in a bar fight, bring the cue stick. So he throws down a cue stick and charges the stage, and he gets up there, and he's trying to climb on the stage, and he puts his hand out like I'm going to help him. So I'm an old wrestler. I just drag him up on the stage, man. I wrapped him up. I was like tossing with him, and he was, you know, I did the old thing where I got him like a bent over, and I was humping him from behind like Deliverance. I said, squeal like a pig. The audience is laughing, but I forget I'm in a fight. And he takes a couple swings and lands one. Then I, of course, retaliate. And I banged him up pretty good and tossed him off the stage. And the place goes crazy. Now, looking back, the really insane part, not that this wasn't insane enough, but the really insane part was that after I finished this fight, I got a ripped shirt, my hair's all messed up, I got a couple nicks on the face, and I turned to the audience and started trying to do my act again. And years later, I'm working with Robert Klein in Atlanta, and I hadn't told that story. It's not like you want to go brag about losing your mind and getting into a fist fight on stage. But I told Klein that story, and he started laughing. He said, I did the same thing. He said, I got into a fist fight in some bowling alley in Brooklyn when I first started, and the wild part was after I finished the fight with the guy, I tried to do my act again. That's the dumb part. I thought, I agree. That's totally the crazy part.
Hey, it throws up. Funny, Joe Dunkel, I worked with him once years ago. He would dress up like a condom to close a show.
Oh, did he?
He sang some song instead of a Camelot, and he'd dress up. No, I'm not lying. He would dress up in this condom suit. And I was talking to this guy, John Uberoth, and he told me, he's like, yeah, one night, like, the music cut out, so Dunkel's just sitting there dressed like a condom. How do you close with that? You know what I'm saying? How do you explain that?
I mean, you don't even want to like TSA going through your luggage if you got a giant condom thing.
I know. So now, how'd you come up with the title, Kicking Through the Ashes? Where did that come from, and what made you stick with that? Because it's very catchy.
I always like that image of if you see somebody's house burned down on the news, you see the owner like just kicking through the ashes trying to find something of value, right? And I felt like that's what I was doing. I was just kind of looking back through my career, which is, my career is over. I still do stand-up comedy, but it's not like I'm trying to become the next sitcom star or anything like that. I joke with other comics. I said the battles are over. All the kingdoms are won that are going to be won. So just have fun doing stand-up now if you can still do it. So I just was like, well, I'm just looking back through my career and see if I can find anything of value in these ashes.
And so you got the title, so then you went and you found these stories. Now you also know, I believe Bill Maher did the introduction. How do you know Bill, and how did that all come about?
Well, Bill's in my book a little bit, but I've known Bill since I moved to New York in 1979. I remember the first time I worked with him. I can remember the place. It was at Jade Fountain. It was one of those Jersey one-nighters Jerry Stanley had out there that was like a $55 one. And I'm working with this guy, and before the show, he's reading the New York Times newspaper. Now I'm pacing about chain smoking cigarettes, and this guy's sitting there reading the New York Times. And then I saw him looking at his, we all may have like a set list of jokes you want to try.
Right.
Now I've got a few things. I have like the worst handwriting. I can barely read my own handwriting. So I got a few things scratched on a piece of paper looking at. This guy looks like he's a spy. His handwriting is microscopic but totally legible. He had like 500 joke titles on a 3x5 card. That's how tight it was. How he was so disciplined. He was so organized. Bill always had that ability to write, and so I was taken by the guy when we first got together. And then of course we both had a lot of fun getting high afterwards. So we became friends. And
you still now? Didn't you work with something him a while ago? Didn't you write something for him?
Yeah, he had a book he wrote back in, I think it was '92, called True Story, and he wanted to adapt it to a screenplay to make a movie out of it. So about a year and a half ago, he had me write the adaptation, and he's got it right now, the final draft. I don't know what he's going to do with it. It's up to him. But I had a lot of fun working on it because, again, it was in this era. The book takes place in 79, 80 in New York City, and a lot of those characters in the book are now well-known comics and people that I knew back then too. Guys who are no longer with us, like Mike King, and I had a lot of fun working on that script.
Now, I Am Comic, you did that documentary. How did that happen? Did you think that really got you back into stand-up? Because you weren't really doing a lot of stand-up before that, right?
No, I was pretty much out of stand-up from about '97 to when Jordan came to me about 2009. He came to me and said he had read I Am Comic. I mean, he had read I Killed, the book I Killed that Mark Schiff and I put out, all the road stories, comic road stories. And he said, I'd like to do a documentary. Jordan said, I want to do a documentary about stand-up comedy. I said, well, I want to make it something more than just road stories, just comics telling road stories. Let's get into what it takes to do stand-up comedy and some of the sort of the behind-the-scenes aspects of it. And he said, that's great, let's do it. And you'll be the sort of the guy who comes up with the questions. You be the writer, the interviewer, and I'll direct it. And we got a guy named Robert Mickelson who will produce it, and away we went. Well, Jordan's a smart guy. He knew eventually he needed something more than just a bunch of comics talking about stand-up. He wanted a little storyline. And I hadn't been around stand-up at all, Steve. I mean, when I got out of doing it, it was too painful to even watch it, so I didn't watch many comics on TV, and I did not go out to see any comics live for years. And now I'm back in these clubs, and we're in the movie. We were sitting in the UCB over on Franklin in Hollywood, and Jordan looked at me, and I just had this look on my face, like I got to do. He just saw it, so he just said, "Why don't you start doing stand-up again?" And you point a camera at us. What could I do? I had to do it.
So, how did you start doing it again? And I mean, what did you find different about it? Because you were on top of your game. You had the TV appearances. You could do as much time as ever. How did you feel the road back into it was?
It was difficult. I had to start over again. I had to treat it like I was a newcomer, but I was not 24 anymore. I was 57 years old, so it was a totally different age to be starting over. Although I knew I could get back to where I was somewhat. I mean, I had a history there, but still, I was flabby. I mean, it's like being totally out of shape, Steve. I mean, I had to come back and work out and get those muscles back. Not just the muscles of doing jokes, but the muscles of reading the audience, the muscles of actually reacting with the audience, being able to improv with the audience. All those things I had to do over again. So I took every job that I could in town. It didn't matter. I did everything. No pay, didn't matter. I just went to open mics and little gigs around town. Bruce Fine had a lot of little gigs around town. I did those. The Sklar brothers who had a show, or Melinda Hill had a show. They were kind enough to put me on stage, and I just got back to doing it.
Did you start getting back on the bike really quick? I mean, how long did it take you? And then when did you feel you were in the groove? And when were you ready to sit there and say, you know what, I got to get back doing this because this is my thing? It took me a year probably to build new material, because I wanted new material. I didn't just want to go out and do the old act. I said, I got to talk about what it is now, being older, or the new differences in iPhones, or all this kind of stuff. And so it took me a while, and I don't think, Kenny Bob Davis, the guy who just died last week. I don't know. I saw the name. I don't know him.
Well, he's a comic. He's also part of this other social organization that I belong to, and I've known the guy a long time. And probably about 5 years ago or whatever, Kenny Bob goes, 4 years ago, whatever. He goes, "Hey, you want to work this casino?" It's like the first out of town job I was offered. He said he saw me doing something local. He said, "Well, you want to work this casino I have up in Oregon?" And I said, "Well, how much you pay middles?" Because I just thought I'll just go in as a middle, right? He said, "No, you're going to headline." I said, "Kenny, I haven't done that. I haven't done that in years, man. I don't know if I can do this." He said, "You're a headliner, man. You always were a headliner. You always will be a headliner, and you're going to go out and headline. You're going to do it. So go do it." So he talked me into doing it, and I mean, I was so nervous. I got up there. It's a great place. It's up in Lincoln City. It's a really great gig, but I was so nervous before. And Kenny Bob called me Friday night before my first show, and he called me Saturday night to give me pep talks before I went up. And, I wobbled a little bit, but I pulled it off, and it gave me the confidence. Okay, now I can do this. Then I think the next one I did was a Laugh Factory in Vegas. Then Harry Basil said, "Why don't you come out to Vegas and do a headline there?" So I just started working my way back in.
Now, your act, like I said, when I worked with you at Valencia, I was lucky enough to see you do this, I said, this show when you just did the stories, when you were working on it at Bob's Espresso. But then you were doing your act when I saw you, but then you switched into the stories. When did you feel the confidence to do that? Because that's a big thing to pull off, because so many people now, there's storytelling shows, but you go to a comedy club and you're there to, they're thinking comedy. So you're sitting there, you have them, you got them eating out of your hands, and it's got to be, it's a risk, but when did you decide to sit there and say, I'm going to start mixing these stories in? Because I remember when we were and I want you to tell the listeners this, when we were at Valencia, you told the one about doing coke with Rodney Dangerfield. Yeah. I just started doing it. I just said, I do different ones on the cruise ship, ones that are, I do them on cruise ships, and they seem to like them. I go, people know enough about stand-up comedy, they've seen it enough, and they enjoy the behind-the-scenes stories sometimes. I don't know where I started it. I just started doing it. I did those shows at Bob's Espresso, Bob Romano's place, and I got confidence doing it there. That, of course, there were a lot of showbiz people that showed up, but to do them in front of regular crowds, I think Las Vegas was the first place I started doing them at the Laugh Factory, and I went, wow, these are regular people. They're not showbiz people. They're people who don't have that natural affinity toward it, but they get these stories and they like them, and I'm getting laughs with them, so I started doing them everywhere. Now, what is a Rodney story?
By the way, it is a totally different rhythm. You're right about that. It's that set up punchline banging them as opposed to storytelling. It's a rhythm, and I tend to do them in the middle of the show, change the rhythm, then I finish up with straight stand-up. The Rodney story was, Rodney, we didn't have any paid gigs back then. When I first moved to New York City in '79, it was the fall before they even started the Jerry Stanley gigs, but Rodney would hire us at his club, give you like $75. You had to work like midnight to 5 in the morning, or 4 in the morning, whenever it was closing, and you did like whatever was left after the headliner, Jackie Mason, finished his shows, or Rodney, or Jackie Vernon, or David Fry, whoever those guys from that generation were in there. And you did gladiator work, you know, it was just drunks in New York, or there were proms. They would bring proms in. I remember doing prom shows, and they were tough, really tough. And one night, the comic in front of me, he got run off the stage, you know, virtually jumped off early, and I had to jump on, and the comic who was supposed to come on after me was late getting there. So I was on a long time, and it was just whipping a chair, you know. My strategy was to find the loudest heckler and bury that guy, right? And Rodney was in the back room. You could hear him laugh. You know, he'd be like, "Oh, all right, man." You know, like comics like to watch another comic struggling, right?
Right.
So I come off the stage. Rodney came up to me. Now, you know, Rodney, he wore the suit and the tie on the stage. When he got off stage, he took it all off and he just wore a robe with nothing under his robe, and he never bothered to close his robe. So when you saw Rodney off stage, you saw Rodney off stage. And he walks up to me and goes, "Hey, kid, you're all right, man. You got a lot of balls, man. I'll tell you that, man. You stay up there. You know how to stay out. You know how to hold that stage. You're all right. Hey, you want to do some cocaine?" It's like, you know. I want to do some cocaine with Rodney Dangerfield. You know. It was 1979. There was no bigger comic. Yeah, of course I want to do some cocaine. So we get into Rodney's office. It was in the basement. It was in his little office. The first thing I noticed was the cocaine was different than the stuff that I was buying off the street. That's my first indication there was such a thing as different, you know, it was celebrity cocaine. It was right. Celebrity. You know, I mean, my coke that I was getting on the street was so cut with baby laxative, it just kept you more regular than high. You know, you do a line, take a dump, do a line, take a dump. And so I'm doing coke with Rodney, and he's telling me stories. I wish I could remember. I can't remember anything. I do remember that at one point I was like, I wanted advice from Rodney. I'm like, "Hey, Rodney, I need some advice. You know, how do I get better?" He says, "Well, you got to tape yourself, man. You tape yourself." And, you know, I told him I used to tape myself when I first started. You know, you take a cassette tape player and you tape your set and listen to it afterwards and try to see what you did right and wrong. But I couldn't stand to hear my own voice. I told him, I said, "I sound like an idiot. I can't stand to listen to my voice." He's like, "Of course you sound like an idiot. You're a comedian. What do you think, you're a fucking brain surgeon? You're a comedian. You're an idiot. You got to tape yourself." And he said, "You got to tape yourself because the audience will tell you what's funny about yourself. You listen to them, they'll tell you. You listen to what they're laughing at, you do more of that. If they're not laughing, you don't do that. And, you know, that's it, man. Individually, they may be orangutans. There's a group, they're genius." And it was the best advice I could get because I started listening to the tapes, and I noticed when I talked about politics or social things, you know, social commentary, I didn't get such big laughs. But when I talked about relationships, being in a relationship with a woman, because that's what I was in, I got big laughs. So I started doing more of that and less talking about politics.
Now
Rodney, there was the whole thing, though. The other thing about the Rodney story was, you know, every time I did a line of coke, I had to bend down to do it off this glass table. I could see Rodney's nuts hanging underneath the table. That was my real lesson. There's no such thing as free cocaine. That was a big lesson. Right?
Now, when you're on the road and you interweave these stories, are they all from the book? And then how do you sit there and decide what stories you're going to tell what night? It's like, you know, we both talk about Springsteen. You know, I was looking at Springsteen's set lists in Philadelphia, and there's some songs he plays every night, and then, you know, he mixes them up. Like when you sit there and you decide in the middle of your set you're going to tell the story, do you feel the climate of the room, and are they all from your book, or do you tell some that aren't from your book from how the room feels?
No, I look, you change. You read the audience. There's things I do, or indicators, lines that let me know where the audience is. A little bit of a risque line early on lets me know if they're into to being a little bit more risque with the sexual material. Or if I do a couple of jokes about dope, you know, pot and ecstasy, early Mac, if they bite into that hard, I go, well, they're going to love the Rodney Coke story. Or the story I did tell about opening up for Peter Tosh with the pot. They're going to love those stories.
What's that story? I haven't heard that story.
Oh, well, this is one, you know, I even when I was drinking and drugging, I never liked to go on stage high. I learned early on it just didn't work for me. So I wasn't a guy that drank before I went on stage or did drugs before I went on stage. I tried to go on as straight as possible. And always, if I did one, it was a mistake. But one night, I was opening up for Peter Tosh, who was one of the Wailers, Bob Marley's group, down in Washington, D.C. It was, I think it was Lisner Auditorium, might have been, but it was a couple thousand people. It was a big audience. And you know Rich Hall, the comedian Rich Hall?
Yeah.
We were friends back then. And I was talking to him before I did this show, and he said, oh, man, I just opened up for them in Philly. Whatever you do, don't go backstage, man. Stay away from backstage. I was standing backstage. I got a contact eye. I could barely do my act. Right? So I'm thinking, look, Rich he's not a drinker and a smoker, and I was a midnight toker. You know what I'm saying? So I thought I had a lot more immunities built up in that area, and I wasn't really worried about it. So the night I'm doing the show with Peter Tosh, I'm backstage, and you know they pick me out easily. I'm nervous. I'm pacing about. I'm the only white guy back there. So one of the guys, hey, funny man, come on over here. And I've never been around Rastafari. And you know, I get over there. This guy hands me a burning baseball bat. I'd never seen a joint this big. I didn't know how to hold it, whether I was supposed to play it like a flute, an oboe. I had no idea how I was supposed to hold this thing, man. It was huge. And I'd never smoked weed like, you know, I've smoked fake weed all my life. You know, I never got Jamaican weed. These guys, I mean, I took 2 hits of this, and next thing I know, they're introducing me. It sounds like I'm being introduced underwater. Right? So I walked on stage. My buddy told me later, I walked on stage, I laughed for 15 minutes, and I left. He said, you didn't do a joke. But they laughed too. They were just laughing at what they thought I was laughing at. And my only saving grace was the audience was as high as me.
So you'll judge a crowd when you're performing. If you start into that, if you make a drug reference, and you can do a story like that, because you know they'll know what you're talking about. I mean, if it's a bunch of 80-year-olds who never smoked pot, they wouldn't know what the hell you're talking about.
Right. So I mean, if the audience is into it, then I go further in. You know, I have little things I do early in my act when I'm doing the stand-up that lets me know what stories are likely to go for, right? And there's certain things, I mean, I usually do about going on stage for the first time, I'll do that first, and then I'll work through, like opening up for the Ramones. I just go through some stories. But I'll do stories that aren't in the book, absolutely.
Now, when you were putting the book together, how did you decide on the structure? And how did you decide, as you said, there's 82 chapters. That's a lot of chapters. How do you decide what to order them? Are they in lumps of certain categories, or you want it across the board? Because as I said, it's, you know, they're great stories and they're about you. And so how did you sit there and decide what goes where? What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, that a lot of it's chronological. I wanted to talk about what it was like before I became a comedian, what leads you to do stand-up comedy. And so a lot of it's chronological because it is also the history of the 80s. So I covered, you know, from that pre-era right before the 80s exploded in the late 70s right through the 80s up to the early 90s. So a lot of it's chronological. And then some of it just made sense to put this here, that there, you know. And, you know, I wanted to cover every part of it. And it just kind of made sense chronologically. You know, and also like, well, okay, if I put this here, I met Robin Williams back in New York in '79. So, you know, you want to put it closer to that time. I met Jay Leno in L.A., so I put Jay Leno's story after I moved to L.A. It just kind of made sense.
Now, what was it like when you met Robin? And I mean, was it true? You know, everyone said he would take material and stuff like that. What was it like when you met him?
Well, I was the MC one night in 1979. My brother, who was in the Coast Guard then, he was 19 years old. He was just down from training, and he was on his way back to our hometown in South Jersey. He stopped in to visit me, so he's standing back in the room. Now, you know, I try to tell him, you know, every once in a while a celebrity drops in. Now, Robin Williams, you couldn't have been hotter than he was then. It's 1979, and I introduced him. The place goes crazy. It's packed, you know, whatever the Improv held back then, 200, 250, whatever. It is packed. Now it's even more packed because everybody's coming off the street, out of the bar, everybody's standing in the room. And Robin Williams, I know, I'm standing in the back of the MC, I'm just watching him destroy like I've never seen anybody destroy a room. Everything he does, they're howling at. Everything. And so he does 45 minutes, and he walks off, and there's, you know, you can't even stand in the place. The tables are so tight, but people are just standing. I mean, just chairs are falling over, and he walks off, and so the next 2 acts just die. You know how that is, man. I mean, they couldn't have followed him. And I'm standing in the back room, and he's standing next to me watching the next act. And he doesn't say it to me, he doesn't say it to anybody in particular, just kind of out loud to himself. He goes, I don't even know what's funny anymore. And I was like, wow, I can't imagine at that point, but I understood what he was saying, that they laughed at everything, so his gyroscope was off. He couldn't tell it was funny because they laughed at everything.
Right.
And it was a problem. As the guy was so much into the art. He was so much into being funny, really being funny, not just cheap laughs, not just okay laughs for laughs, but it really concerned him that he was losing his bearings. And so, he turned to me in that kind of like looking a little lost on his face at the time, and I had some cocaine in my pocket. I thought I'd share some, and that started our friendship that night. So we hung out, and he was great to my brother. I'll tell you this, my brother, this was not a time when everybody was thank the troops or how to buy a beer for the troops. This was 1979. My brother was in uniform. He was a geeky-looking Coast Guard guy in uniform at the time, pimply-faced 19-year-old. We go out to bars with Robin. Of course, women are seeing Robin. They're like, they're all over the place. They're coming down, but nobody. I'm sitting near Robin. My brother's next to me. Nobody's talking to my brother. Next thing you know, this woman comes down to where my brother's sitting and starts talking to him. So we walk out, and my brother's, we'll walk 4 o'clock in the morning, we're going back to my apartment. My brother's, he's like, wow, man, did that was a good little woman talking to me. He was really excited about it. And I didn't say anything to him then, but I had checked with Robin when I kind of looked at Robin and said, did you send her down there? And he just kind of gave me a little wink, a little look. You know what I mean? He sent her down there to talk to my brother. And I thought, that's a really cool thing. And I've had experience with him over the years many times. I wasn't a friend. I'm not going to claim to be a friend. But every time I saw him, he was a good guy. And, the stealing thing, hey, there's a lot of guys that steal. But how many guys that steal, when they get called on it, write out a check for $1,500?
That happened to you?
To write. You know what I mean?
Did that happen to you? Did he write you a check?
Jokes were being sold for $50 a piece back then. And guys would call him on it, and he'd just write him a huge check. I mean, it's just the way he worked. Look, there was a joke that I did. I'd done it on the Letterman show. It was, back then it was the late 80s, and everybody was talking about the Antichrist. I don't know if you remember that or not, but there was a lot of talk about the Antichrist. So I said, everybody's looking for the Antichrist. It's not me. I checked my scalp. I got 2 6s and a 5. Funny joke. Well, Robin did it on Saturday Night Live the week after I did it on Letterman. And somebody must have said something to him. I didn't see it. Somebody told me later, hey, Robin did your joke on Saturday Night Live. I don't care. I'd already done it on Letterman. I got my money's worth out of it for as far as I was concerned. Once I did a joke on Letterman or Carson, I kind of dropped it from the act for a while anyway. And Robin came up to me at the Improv, and he said, I understand I owe you some money. And literally he's pulling out a checkbook. And I said, nah, you don't have any money. I don't want any money for that. I don't want any money. I already got it. I already did it before you did it on TV. I did it. He's like, oh, you're right. And that was it.
Now, the book, deals with, you said, the explosion. What was it like being around the explosion? Because I started comedy like in 88, and it was still hot. But what was it like when it exploded? And looking back, you must have gotten so much material that you put into the book. It must have just been a really different time because you're on the beginning. It's like when disco grew. It was one of those trends. What was it like being a comic at that time?
We were rock stars. We had the ability to see. They didn't need you to draw audiences. The audiences came. The places were packed. The comedy clubs were packed. They needed comics that could hold the audience for at least a full hour as a headliner. And back then, again, the drunk driving laws were different. They weren't really worried about sending audiences drunks out into the roads. And so the longer you did, the more liquor they sold, the happier they were. And it exploded. I remember one time Bill Hicks and I went out. We did a week in Oklahoma City. And then they go, oh, well, there's a new club just opened in Tulsa. You should go over to that one, too. And we went out to go do a week together. I think we stayed out for about 5 weeks. I really, a long time. He didn't come back. And clubs were just popping up like crazy. And, you felt like it was never going to stop. It was just going to keep getting better and better. It was the explosion. I remember the first time I went out to do Fort Lauderdale comic strip, opened in like winter of 1980. Okay, it was like the second paying comedy club on the East Coast, probably after Garvin. And there, I'm the MC because they Richie Tinkin and Bob Wax, who were on the comic strip. My girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, was Carol Leeper. She was a comic there. She wanted them to have me go down with them. One of the first weeks the club opened, they said, look, we can't, and Rich, he's an improv back more than he's a comic strip back. We have too many guys ahead of him here. We can't send him as a regular actor. It's Joe Bolster, Kelly Rogers, Mark Schiff, and Carol. But we'll send him as the MC, we'll give him a half the pay. I think it was like $175 for the week. That's what I got. But it was more than sitting around New York, so I took the pay, right? Well, I get down there, and one night at the Comedy Condo, they still had a telephone then, Kelly Rogers on the phone, he motions me to come over. When I come over, he holds the receiver in his chest, says, whatever this guy asks if you can do, say you can do. I get on the phone, the guy says, I got a comedy club just open in Ottawa. I need a headliner next week. Can you come there and do 2 45-minute shows, different shows? I go, yeah, I can. He says, all right. So we get the details. I take the gig. I hang up. I go to Kelly. Kelly, I got 20 minutes if they buy everything I do. He said, you'll fill it. You'll figure it out. Go do it. So I go up there to Ottawa. I do the weekend, whatever it was, the 4 days or whatever. I get my pay at Saturday night. The guy says, it's great. I want to have you back soon. He says, there's a guy on the phone wants to talk to you. I get on the phone. The guy says, I'm Ernie Butler. I'm from Montreal. I got a comedy club here. I need a headliner next week. Can you come here? I said, absolutely. I finished that week. Ernie puts you on the phone. He said, a guy named Mark Breslin owns a comedy club in Yuck Yucks, Toronto. Said, I got a comedy club here in Toronto. I need you for next week. Can you come here? I went out as an MC 1 week. I came back 4 weeks later as a headliner.
God.
That's how it worked.
Now the book, as you know, people, it's called Kicking Through the Ashes. No, they can get it at Amazon, and they can get it at where can they all get it?
They get it at Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, and Amazon.com. Absolutely.
Now, can they get it from you?
They can get it from me at rshides@AOL.com. RSHIDES at AOL.com. Send me an email. We'll work it out. You get an autographed copy from me.
Now, how did you come up from the cover, and where is that picture from? It looks like you're smoking a cigarette on stage, and you're sweating. Yeah. And you're sweating. Yeah. How did you decide on that picture, and how did you decide on the other backgrounds of the pictures, like the different clippings and stuff like that?
I had a couple pictures. This young photographer named Roseanne Jarvis. Her name was Blamey Jarvis. It's now Jarvis. It was Blamey then. Back in 1980, when I first went to the Yuck Yucks, I went to Yuck Yucks probably about 5 times in between 80 and 81. They kept having me back. And she would take pictures. So I had that picture, and I always loved it because it seemed to me to personify what stand-up was. I couldn't do it without the crowd. I had to have the audience's help. And obviously I was on stage one night. I used to smoke cigarettes on stage. I used to drink beers on stage. And I was probably have a hard time lighting my smoke. My Bic lighter went out or whatever. And there was a guy in the audience offered up a match. And to me, that just said the whole deal. I loved that picture. So I wanted that picture to be the cover. And then I wanted, it was my idea, to put all the ads from newspapers back in the 80s when they'd always mangle my name. They'd always misspell my name. Or there's one picture there, not only did they misspell my name at Cleveland Comedy Club ad that was Rich Bydner, Phydner, they put Shirley Hempel's picture instead of mine. Shirley Hempel, the black comedian, they put her picture instead of mine. So that's the way, they didn't care. They were so sloppy because it was almost like an obligatory ad. The places were packed, and so I wanted to put all those kind of ads on there to say, don't take this too seriously, man. They never got your name right, but you still had a career.
Now, you go back to Jersey to perform, which you were named one of the top 3. What county is that? It was you, Bruce Willis, and someone else. It was I think it was New Jersey Magazine. They broke down the counties. And we were Salem County? What county was it?
Salem County, my friend.
And it was Bruce Willis, you, and there was one other guy.
I don't remember the other guy, but that I'm in the top 3 of anything. It's fantastic. I love my hometown, Pennsville, New Jersey. I go back there all the time. I see my friends. I just love my hometown. I had a great childhood in terms of where I grew up. There was an amusement park there. There was an old amusement park that we used to run around, and I get a kick out of it. It's a small rural county. My grandfather was a farmer there. It was a small rural county. I think there were only 60,000 people. in the county when I lived there, and I think there's still only about 60,000 people in the county.
Well, I performed there back in like probably 1990. It was Pennsville or Penns Grove, and there was a bar called Bubba's, and it's basically the bar was what it sounded like, Bubba's. Now, what's it like when you go back and perform? I mean, do you tell the stories about the comedy, or when you're in there?
I was just there performing in June, and I go down to the Borgata, Atlantic City, and I did a show at my hometown. I've done shows in my hometown the last couple of years every time I go back, and I tell stories about the hometown, about growing up there. I tell stories about stand up. They love that. People, they get a kick out of the stories, especially in the hometown. I mean, there was a little amusement park, right? And it had and all the guys that worked there it was almost like a carny kind of thing. They were all kind of crazy drunks and itinerants, and every summer they'd come work these rides, and people from Philly came down. It was a big amusement park back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, but by the 60s it was past its prime, and so we kids we'd hang out there, and we'd have the money to get on the rides and stuff, but we'd just hang out in the penny arcade trying to snatch free games that maybe somebody left behind on the pinball machine or something. And somebody comes running into the arcade and said, "Charlie's letting everybody on for free on the Bubble Bounce." Now, the Bubble Bounce ride, it spun around. It had these little cars you sat in, and you could actually turn the wheel on the cars and make them spin faster, and then the big whole ride would spin around and then lift up and come down. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we all run out there, and we get on the rides, and Charlie's right. Charlie wasn't taking tickets. He's just sitting there drinking his Muscatel, and we ran past him and got on the rides. So the ride starts, and it goes on, and it goes on, and they ain't stopping. And we're yelling at Charlie as we go by. You go by 40 miles an hour, you go by the little booth. "Charlie, stop the ride." We're all screaming. We're like, 11, 12 years old, whatever. We're screaming, "Charlie, stop the ride." And he's just, ignored us. So finally, a couple of my friends, Bill Estat, Tim McAllister, and I, we jump off the ride. We had to jump off the ride. We just get thrown into the cyclone fence, right? Just bounce off it. We're little monkeys back then. And we run over to the booth where Charlie's there drinking his rot gut wine. And we go, "Charlie, kids are throwing up on the ride. You got to stop the ride." He just takes a sip of his wine. He goes, "I didn't tell him to get on. I'm not telling him to get off."
Now, that's so funny because it's like, I remember those types of rides. Now, when you're back, like I know when I used to work the door at the Comedy Factory Outlet, and Dom Irera would play, the whole crowd would be full of people from South Philly who knew his aunt or knew him, even though they didn't know him.
Yeah.
When you go back and play around your town, are there people that they swear they know you, but you're like, I don't remember this person?
Oh no, they all know me. They look, the bar is packed with people I went to school with, people, and then there's like the kids of the people I went to school with. So there's younger people there. Then there's the parents bring their kids in who are now grown adults to come see me, and so they all know me. I never get more nervous for any show. A room full of strangers, you want to do well. You don't want to bomb. But a room full of people who know you, not just know you, know who you are. They grew up with me. I can't lie in there. They know. I can't tell them I was something I wasn't. They know I was a terrible football player. They know I was a terrible wrestler. There's no come back and strutting on there like I was somebody. They know who I was. So I'm more nervous for that show than any show.
Well, you're top 3 in Salem County, so they got to remember that shit.
Yeah. I don't know what the look, Bruce Willis obviously is the guy. Right. But I don't know what other county I could even come close to top 100. I'm sure whatever county Sinatra's in, I'm sure there's, North Jersey, you got Sinatra, Frankie Valli, and Springsteen probably in the same county. I don't know what,
So how's the book sales been going, and how's the reaction to it?
People are liking it. I'm getting, I love the people, like when comics love it, and I love the people who were there for it. And then I'm getting messages of people who never did stand-up comedy go, "I had no idea. And it's hilarious. It's a funny book. I had no idea that's what you guys went through. You do." So I love both ends of it. I like when people who know the game dig the book, and I like when people who don't know the game dig the book. And, the sales are the sales. I haven't asked Bob Andelman, the publisher. I've asked him how the sales are going. I've sent out about 100 autograph books so far, and I didn't ask him. I don't know anything for 6 months about Amazon. I don't want to know.
Now, do you sell it after your show?
I did this last week in Vegas. So actually, I've sold about 130 of the autograph books. So I sold 30 books in Vegas this week. It's all I took. I could have sold. I sold them out the first couple of nights. I could have sold more. I didn't think that they would sell. I'd never done the merch thing. I was never a merch guy.
Yeah, you know? merch is crazy. Like I know people like there's MCs selling keychains that blink with their head on it. You know, like they're like weird shit. You're like, what the hell? You're the MC. What are you selling? And people buy this stuff. It's crazy.
I just never wanted to turn my post show high into a flea market. I just you know, I'd like to say hello to people, but I don't want to make them do a walk of shame, like to avoid my eyes to get past me.
We got to wrap up. We got to wrap up soon. Where are you playing? What's your schedule for the next few weeks?
Well, I'm going out to cruise ships the next 3 weeks. Saturday night, I leave to go to Canada for 3 weeks on the St. Lawrence River, which I love.
Now, you get to enjoy all like the day trips because you don't work a lot. You get to enjoy all that stuff when you're on a cruise.
Depends where it is, you know. Whether I'm going to do it or not. Look, I was in Amsterdam. I love going off. It's a beautiful city. I like walking around. I went to Anne Frank Museum. There's things I do if I haven't been in a place before. But obviously, you know, if it's Cabo, I don't need to go to see one more senior of frogs.
Right.
So. You know.
Now, do you miss the clubs when you're in the cruise ships, or are you getting used to that, or what happens?
No, I don't. Look, to me, it's always like, who pays the most money? I'm kind of like Lenny Bruce used to say that the best room is the one that pays the most money. So I'm not getting hired in the comedy clubs. They're not hiring me, so it's okay. I'm very grateful to work the cruise ships. My audiences are there now. But the older audiences, you know, are there. I'm 63. The audiences are like 40 to 80. That I'm right in there. I'm fine. I'm happy.
Now, are you thinking of putting a book out with all the stories you couldn't put in this book?
Nah, I'm not sure what I'll do with those stories. Maybe one day I'll put like in the Kindle version. We were talking about just adding them on as a bonus to the Kindle version a year or so, something like that maybe. But no, I'm not going to write. I'm done writing about stand-up comedy right now. I'm going to write something else. But yeah, I think I said what I needed to say about stand-up comedy right now.
Cool, man. Well, I want to thank you for coming back on. I think this is your third or fourth time. It's always a pleasure. You know, we talk Philadelphia sports. Now, give your. Did you get on Twitter? Are you tweeting yet?
Yeah, I'm starting to.
Okay. What's your Twitter address?
R Shides.
R Shides. And the website is Rich Scheidner. It's RITCHSHYDNER.com. And that will lead you to the links to get the book, right?
That's right. And you can go on Amazon to get it, or see me on Facebook. I'm public on Facebook now, so you can do that too.
So people, go check them out. Follow them on Twitter. Google them. Watch I Am Comic. Buy the book. And follow me on Twitter. It's at Cooper Talk. That's at Cooper Talk. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. I have 554 episodes up there. You can also email me, cooper@coopertalk.net. That will work. And don't forget, I'll play you with Words with Friends. It's Cooper Talk 1. Instagram is Cooper Talk 1 also. And the thing about Instagram is it shows pictures of food I make at times because they were all in my cookbook when I had my heart condition a few years ago. I wrote a book, Low Sodium Cooking. It's called Stop the Salt. 120 recipes. Easy to make. No pictures to intimidate you. There's no long list of ingredients. If you don't have cumin, don't worry. You won't have cumin of a recipe. Go buy it. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com. But if you go to StopTheSalt.com, I'll sign it, and I make more money, and that's what it's about. And also, my new sponsor, check them out. It's Blowfish for Hangovers. Go to forhangovers.com, F-O-R, hangovers.com. Type in Cooper, and you get 20% off. But if you really need it and you're hungover, just go to CVS, because they have it. So it's F-O-R, hangovers.com. So don't forget, people, go to richscheidner.com. Buy his book. The stories are great. You know, follow him on Facebook, because he put some great stories that didn't make the cut, and they're all great stories. But this guy's a master storyteller, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. So that's about it. Follow me at Cooper Talk. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and 2 weeks from now, we'll all be visiting Pennsylvania. You guys have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon.